Think of your mind as an architect, one that works in perfect silence, constructing the foundations of inner strength without the need for hammers or blueprints, without a single spoken word. This is the unseen labor of the Stoic mind, building resilience, clarity, and unshakable control from the quietest corners of your being. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. It's a reminder that mastery doesn't come from noise, from grand declarations or constant action, but from the disciplined stillness where true transformation begins. What if the most powerful version of yourself isn't forged in the chaos of the world, but in the quiet moments you carve out for reflection? What if the key to unbreakable focus, unshakable calm, and unwavering discipline lies not in what you add to your life, but in what you subtract: the distractions, the unnecessary reactions, the mental clutter? This is the hidden architecture of Stoicism, a philosophy that doesn't shout its lessons but whispers them in the spaces between thoughts. It's not about suppressing emotion or pretending indifference. It's about constructing an inner citadel so strong that no external storm can breach its walls. In this video, we'll explore how the Stoics built this unshakable control through practices that might surprise you. It's not about sheer willpower or grinding through hardship. It's about the subtle art of detachment, the deliberate pause before reaction, the quiet questioning of every impulse. Imagine a life where frustration doesn't derail you, where uncertainty doesn't paralyze you, where every challenge becomes a chance to reinforce your inner design. That's the promise of Stoic silence, and by the end of this journey, you'll have the tools to start building it for yourself. The blueprint is simpler than you think, but the materials, they're already within you. All that's left is to begin. The Stoics understood something profound about human suffering, that much of it comes not from the world itself, but from our own misaligned expectations. At the heart of their philosophy lies a simple but radical blueprint: the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it plainly when he said, "Some things are within our power while others are not." This isn't just advice, it's the first brick in the hidden architecture of a Stoic mind. Think of it like building a house. You wouldn't start by worrying about the weather outside. You'd focus on laying a strong foundation. In the same way, Stoicism teaches us to distinguish between what we can shape and what we must accept. Take something as ordinary as traffic. You're running late, stuck behind a sea of brake lights. The natural reaction is frustration, maybe even anger. But here's the question the Stoics would ask: does honking your horn change the traffic? Does gripping the steering wheel tighter make the cars ahead move faster? The answer is obvious, yet we still exhaust ourselves trying to control what's fundamentally uncontrollable. The real power lies in redirecting that energy inward, choosing patience, using the delay to listen to an audiobook, or simply observing your own reactions without being ruled by them. That shift, subtle as it seems, is where the hidden architecture takes shape. This mental framework isn't about passive resignation, it's about clarity. Imagine holding a handful of sand. Clench your fist too tightly and it slips through your fingers, but with just the right balance, you can hold it effortlessly. The Stoic mind works the same way, knowing when to tighten focus and when to loosen the grip. So here's an exercise to try today. Identify one situation where you've been conflating control with lack of control. Maybe it's a coworker's attitude, a family member's choices, or even the outcome of a project. Ask yourself, is this truly mine to command? If not, what would it look like to invest that energy where it actually matters? That's the blueprint in action, building resilience not by fighting the world, but by refining your inner design. Silence wasn't just the absence of noise for the Stoics, it was the workshop where the mind's most enduring work happened. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, called solitude the school of self, a place where the chatter of the world faded and the voice of reason could finally be heard. Picture this: Rome in the 1st century, a city teeming with political intrigue, roaring crowds, and relentless demands. Yet Seneca, advisor to an emperor, would rise before dawn to sit in silence, not to escape the chaos but to master it. He didn't retreat from life, he fortified himself for it. That's the paradox of Stoic silence. It's not about withdrawal, but about preparation. Modern life bombards us with noise, not just the sounds around us, but the endless scroll of notifications, the pressure to react instantly, the mental static of unfinished tasks. The Stoics recognized this centuries ago. External chaos, they argued, is inevitable, but internal stillness, that's a choice. Think of it like the eye of a hurricane. The storm rages on all sides, yet at the center there's calm. That's the space the Stoics carved out daily. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, began his mornings by writing in his journal, not to record events but to clarify his thoughts. He called it a digging within, a practice of turning inward before facing outward. So what does this look like in practice? Take the example of Thomas Edison, who wasn't a Stoic but embodied their principles. He'd sit for hours in his workshop, not tinkering with inventions but simply staring at a wall. When asked why, he replied, resting, no, thinking. That deliberate pause, that refusal to rush into action, was where his breakthroughs emerged. The Stoics would have nodded in approval. Silence for them wasn't passive, it was the fertile ground where judgment could root and grow. Here's the challenge: when was the last time you intentionally created mental silence? Not meditation in the formal sense, but simply giving your mind room to breathe. Maybe it's 5 minutes before bed, away from screens, or a walk without headphones. The goal isn't to empty your thoughts, but to observe them without being swept away. Seneca warned against the man who is everywhere but nowhere, constantly reacting but never reflecting. The workshop of silence is where you stop building your life on the shaky foundation of impulse and start crafting it with intention. The tools are simple: a quiet corner, a willingness to pause, but the architecture it creates. Unshakable. The Stoic discipline of perception is like installing a filter between the world and your reactions, one that catches distortions before they color your judgment. Marcus Aurelius began each day with a simple but profound ritual. He'd remind himself that the people he'd encounter might be rude, impatient, or selfish, not because the world was against him, but because they were human. He called it seeing things as they are, not as they appear. This wasn't pessimism, it was mental clarity. Imagine waking up and mentally preparing for traffic, interruptions, or criticism the way you'd check the weather forecast. You wouldn't blame the sky for raining, you'd just grab an umbrella. The Stoics applied that same practicality to their emotions. Consider a coworker who snaps at you during a meeting. The immediate interpretation might be, they disrespect me, or they're trying to undermine me. But what if, like Marcus, you pause to ask, is that truly the only explanation? Could they be stressed about a deadline? Did they sleep poorly? Maybe their tone had nothing to do with you at all. The Stoics called this prosouch attention to your initial impressions. It's the habit of interrogating your own assumptions before reacting. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That split-second pause where you question whether your interpretation is fact or fiction is where the discipline of perception thrives. Here's the twist: this isn't about suppressing anger or pretending everything's fine. It's about reclaiming agency. When you react to a coworker's comment as if it's a personal attack, you hand them control over your mood. But when you choose to see it neutrally, they're having a hard day, you retain power. The event hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. The ancient Stoics compared this to a ship's rudder. Small adjustments in perception can steer your entire emotional course. Try this today. Pick one moment where your first impression spiraled into frustration. Maybe it was a text message that felt cold, a stranger's dismissive glance, or a plan that fell through. Now challenge yourself to generate 3 alternate explanations, none of which involve malice or personal slight. The goal isn't to gaslight yourself into positivity, but to recognize that your initial judgment is just one version of the story. Like Marcus scribbling in his journal at dawn, you're not avoiding reality, you're sharpening it. The more you practice this, the quieter those knee-jerk reactions become, and the sturdier your inner architecture grows. Perception, the Stoics knew, is the foundation everything else is built upon. Get that right, and the walls of your mind won't crumble so easily. Imagine your mind as a closet. Over time, it fills with clothes you never wear, impulse buys that don't fit, outdated trends you cling to out of habit, items you keep just in case. Now picture opening that closet every morning, trying to navigate the clutter just to find what you actually need. That's what happens when we don't declutter our minds. Seneca saw this 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "Life is long enough if you know how to use it." His real warning: we squander it on trivialities, stuffing our mental space with desires that don't serve us and fears that never materialize. Today, the clutter isn't just in our thoughts, it's in our pockets. Notifications, endless scrolling, the pressure to consume more, react faster, do more. The average person checks their phone over 100 times a day, each ping a tiny fracture in their attention. Seneca called this being busy to no purpose, mistaking motion for progress. But here's the Stoic alternative: mental minimalism, not deprivation but curation. Just as you donate clothes you no longer need, you can release the mental debris weighing you down, the obsession with others' opinions, the what-ifs that spiral into anxiety, the craving for comfort at the expense of growth. Start with 5 minutes, sit quietly and ask, what am I holding onto that no longer serves me? Maybe it's resentment over a past slight, envy of someone else's success, or the illusion that you'll be happy once you achieve some future milestone. Write it down, then physically crumple or tear the paper. It's a simple act, but it mirrors the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, premeditating what you'd lose if life stripped away everything non-essential. The goal isn't to eliminate desire entirely, but to distinguish between what nourishes your inner citadel and what weakens its walls, digital distractions. Treat them like junk mail. Unsubscribe from the newsletters of your mind, the apps engineered to hijack your attention, the news cycles that thrive on outrage. Seneca advised, set aside a certain number of days during which you'll be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare. Try it with your screen time. 1 hour less today, notice what fills that space: boredom, restlessness, good. That's the sound of your mind relearning how to be still, how to want less so you can live more. The clutter didn't build overnight, and neither will the clarity. But every minute you reclaim is a brick laid in the foundation of a quieter, stronger mind. There's a moment, just a fraction of a second, between what happens to you and how you respond. The Stoics called this the gap of power, and mastering it is where true emotional freedom begins. Epictetus, who knew firsthand the sting of injustice as a former slave, put it this way: don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. That pause, that breath, is the difference between being swept away by emotion and standing firm in your principles. Picture a heated argument. Voices rise, words sharpen, and the urge to retaliate feels almost physical. In that instant, the Stoic doesn't suppress their anger. They simply refuse to let it dictate their next move. Instead of firing back, they step back, not as a retreat but as a strategic choice. Think of it like a chess player who doesn't impulsively move a piece just because their opponent provoked them. They take a breath, assess the board, and respond with intention. That's the power of the pause. It's not passive, it's the ultimate act of control. Here's the surprising truth: that gap between stimulus and response isn't just philosophical, it's biological. Neuroscience shows that emotional reactions flare up in milliseconds, but the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoned judgment, takes longer to engage. The Stoics, without modern science, understood this implicitly. Their practice of pausing was a way to bridge that delay, to let reason catch up to emotion. Try this the next time you feel provoked, whether it's a rude comment, a frustrating delay, or even an internal spiral of worry. Before you react, insert a single breath. Not a deep, dramatic inhale, just enough space to ask Epictetus' question: what does this moment truly require of me? You might find that the insult loses its sting, the inconvenience its weight, the anxiety its grip. The pause isn't about denying your feelings, it's about refusing to let them hijack your actions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." That calm isn't the absence of storms, it's the ability to stand steady within them. Every time you choose pause over reaction, you're not just diffusing a momentary conflict. You're reinforcing the architecture of your mind, brick by brick, breath by breath, and the more you practice, the wider that gap of power becomes, until what once triggered you becomes just another chance to prove who's really in control. The Stoics didn't just endure adversity, they learned to forge strength from it, like blacksmiths tempering steel in fire. Marcus Aurelius, who faced betrayal, illness, and the weight of an empire, wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way." He wasn't offering empty optimism, he was revealing a radical truth. The very things that seem to block our path can become the material we build with. Imagine a river encountering a boulder. Does it stop? No. It finds a new route, carving deeper channels, gaining momentum as it flows. That's the art of emotional alchemy, not denying hardship but transforming its energy. Take Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, who spent 2 years selling fax machines door to door while nursing her idea for shapewear. Rejection was constant. Instead of internalizing it, she reframed each no as a step closer to a yes. When manufacturers laughed at a prototype, she didn't see failure, she saw a chance to prove them wrong. By the time she pitched to Neiman Marcus, she'd turned every setback into a lesson in resilience. The Stoics would have recognized her mindset instantly. Epictetus, born into slavery, said, "Difficulties show men what they are." It's not about pretending adversity doesn't sting, but about asking, what can this reveal in me that comfort never could? Here's the key: emotional alchemy isn't magic. It's a deliberate choice to interrogate hardship. When a project falls through, instead of thinking, "I'm doomed," ask, "What does this free me to pursue?" When criticism lands, swap, "They're out to get me," for "What grain of truth can I extract?" Even grief, perhaps the heaviest metal, can be shaped into compassion for others suffering. The Stoic doesn't avoid the fire, they learn to work with its heat. Try this today. Pick one recent setback, big or small, a missed promotion, a cancelled plan, a mistake that embarrassed you. Now, write down 3 ways it might serve you. Maybe the job rejection redirects you to a better fit. Maybe the embarrassment taught you humility. The goal isn't to sugarcoat the pain, but to hold it up to the light and see its edges differently. As Marcus scribbled to himself on the battlefield, the impediment to action advances action. The obstacle isn't just in your way, it is the way. And the more you practice this reframe, the more your mind becomes not just resilient, but resourceful, turning every stumble into a step forward. Seneca described the soul as a fortress, an inner citadel with walls so strong that no outside force could breach them. He wasn't talking about physical walls, but the boundaries we build around our principles, the unshakable core that remains intact even when everything else crumbles. Picture a medieval castle. The outer courtyards might be overrun, the gates battered, but the keep at the center stands untouched. That's the Stoic ideal, a mind so grounded in its own truth that no insult, failure, or stroke of bad luck can destabilize it. The irony, most of us spend our lives fortifying the wrong walls. We chase promotions, likes, and applause, mistaking them for strength, when real resilience is built in silence, brick by brick, through choices no one else sees. Think of the last time someone's criticism kept you up at night, or a missed opportunity left you questioning your worth. That's what happens when your sense of self lives in the outer courtyards dependent on things you can't control. The Stoics offered a radical alternative: withdraw into the citadel, not to hide from life, but to engage with it from a place of unshakable clarity. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire under constant threat, wrote his most profound insights not in speeches or decrees, but in a private journal never meant to be read. That was his citadel, a space where his values, not external chaos, dictated his thoughts. Here's the challenge: what are the non-negotiables that form your inner keep? Maybe it's integrity, doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Perhaps it's compassion, refusing to let others' bitterness harden your heart. For Seneca, it was the conviction that no external loss could diminish his self-worth. He lived this literally. When Emperor Nero ordered him to commit suicide, his final act was dictating letters to friends, his voice steady until the end. His citadel held. Contrast that with modern life, where we outsource our self-assurance to algorithms and opinions. A single negative comment can unravel us. A quiet weekend without plans feels like failure, and we measure our days in productivity rather than purpose. The Stoics would call this building on sand. Your citadel isn't made of achievements or approval. It's crafted from the truth you choose to live by, especially when it costs you something. Try this exercise. Grab a pen and divide a page into 2 columns. On one side, list the things you rely on for validation: social media metrics, your title at work, your physical appearance. On the other, write the values you'd cling to if all those vanished tomorrow. That second column, that's your blueprint. The goal isn't to abandon external pursuits, but to anchor them to something deeper, so that when storms come, and they will, you're not left scrambling for shelter. The citadel isn't a retreat. It's the stronghold from which you face the world, unshaken because you've built on bedrock. Stoic detachment often gets misunderstood as cold indifference, a withdrawal from life's messiness into some emotionless shell. But that's not what the Stoics practiced. Epictetus, who taught that we should love deeply yet hold things lightly, put it this way: when you kiss your child, whisper to yourself, tomorrow you may die. At first glance, that sounds jarring, even cruel. But look closer. He wasn't advocating numbness. He was highlighting a profound truth. Love isn't diminished by acknowledging its fragility. It's deepened. The Stoic doesn't love less, they cling less. They engage fully while releasing the illusion of control. Parenting offers the perfect test of this balance. Imagine teaching a child to ride a bike. You steady them at first, your hands gripping the seat, but you know the real lesson happens when you let go. That moment when they wobble, maybe even fall, isn't neglect. it's trust. The Stoic approach to relationships works the same way. You don't withhold affection to avoid future pain. You pour it in fully, even as you accept that outcomes, their choices, their struggles, even their distance aren't yours to command. Seneca wrote letters to his friends filled with warmth and counsel, yet he reminded himself daily that friendship, like all things, could vanish in an instant. That duality, care without possession, is the heart of Stoic detachment. Now apply this beyond parenting. Where else do you confuse attachment with love or control with commitment? Maybe it's a project at work you've over-engineered because you're terrified of flaws, or a friendship where you suppress disagreements to keep the peace. Clinging too tightly often masks fear of loss, of irrelevance, of admitting some things were never ours to hold. The Stoics would ask, does white-knuckling life ever really secure it? Or does it just drain the joy from the very things we're trying to preserve? Here's the practice. Pick one relationship or role where you feel tension between involvement and over-identification. It might be mentoring a colleague, caring for an aging parent, or even your relationship with your own body. Now, ask two questions. First, what's the essence of my care here? Strip away the performative layers, the need to be seen as competent, the anxiety over others' opinions, until you find the core. Second, where am I grasping for guarantees that don't exist? The goal isn't to detach from love or effort, but from the exhausting delusion that perfection is possible or permanence is promised. Epictetus trained his students to say farewell to everything they cherished each night, not as morbidity, but as liberation. When we stop demanding life conform to our demands, we start seeing it as it is, a fleeting, beautiful collaboration where our job isn't to dictate the terms, but to show up fully, tend what's before us, and release the rest. That's detachment without indifference, not a wall against the world, but hands open enough to hold it lightly and love it deeply. As daylight fades and the noise of the world softens, the Stoics turned inward, not with guilt or regret, but with the quiet precision of an architect reviewing blueprints. Seneca called this his nightly audit, a ritual where he'd ask two piercing questions. What did I improve today? And where did I falter? Picture him in his lamplit study, scroll in hand, tracing the contours of his choices, not to dwell on missteps, but to refine tomorrow's design. This wasn't self-criticism, it was calibration. The modern equivalent might be a pilot debriefing after a flight, not to lament turbulence, but to adjust the course. Consider how most of us end our days, mindlessly scrolling, numbing fatigue with screens, or replaying conversations we wish had gone differently. The Stoic alternative takes just 5 minutes. Sit with your hands empty, your devices away, and ask Seneca's questions, but with a twist. First, what small victory can I acknowledge? Maybe you paused before snapping at a coworker, or chose water over a third coffee. Stoicism isn't about grand gestures, it's the accumulation of tiny, intentional acts. Then, where did I let externals dictate my peace, not to judge but to notice patterns? Did a stranger's rude comment hijack your mood? Did an unmet expectation rob you of presence? Here's the key. This ritual works because it's silent. No journaling required, no elaborate scoring system, just you and your thoughts in the dark. The absence of performance is what makes it potent. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations for no audience but himself, and that raw honesty is what gave them power. Try this for 3 nights, not as a test but as an experiment. You might discover that the question, where did I falter, begins to shift. It's no longer about blame, but about spotting the weak joints in your inner architecture. The places where a little more reinforcement could turn reactivity into resilience. The true magic of this practice, it doesn't just review the day, it reshapes the next one. Seneca observed that we're quick to count our coins at night, but neglect to account for our lives. Those 5 minutes of silence become the loom where you weave intention into action, where stumbling blocks transform into stepping stones. No fanfare, no witnesses, just you and the quiet work of becoming. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, had a radical rule for conversation. Only speak if your words will improve the silence. Imagine standing at the edge of every conversation with that filter, not just weighing whether your words are true or kind, but whether they're necessary at all. This isn't about suppressing your voice, it's about refining it. Think of silence as the raw material of speech, and every sentence you utter as a deliberate chisel strike, shaping that material into something worthwhile. Most of us treat speech like a faucet left running, words spilling out without conscious direction. The Stoics saw it differently. To them, controlled speech wasn't restraint, it was craftsmanship. Consider gossip, one of the most common ways we misuse language. It's easy to dismiss as harmless chatter, but the Stoics recognized its hidden cost. When you dissect someone's choices or spread unverified stories, you're not just wasting breath, you're training your mind to focus on the trivial, the external, the things you can't control. Contrast that with purposeful dialogue, a discussion aimed at solving a problem, comforting a friend, or exchanging ideas that sharpen your thinking. One depletes your mental clarity, the other fortifies it. Marcus Aurelius warned himself in his journals to avoid aimless talk, not because he disliked people, but because he valued the integrity of his attention. Here's the subtle power of this practice. When you start measuring your speech against the standard of improvement, does this uplift, clarify, or serve? You begin to notice how much of daily conversation is automatic, reactive, even performative. The coworker who monologues about their weekend without asking about yours, the social media comment fired off in haste, the complaint repeated solely to bond over shared frustration. None of these are inherently wrong, but the Stoic question remains, do they make the silence better? Try this today. Carry a small notebook or use your phone's notes app to tally how often your speech aligns with clear intention. Not to judge yourself, but to observe. You might notice patterns like defaulting to sarcasm when uncomfortable, or filling pauses with unnecessary details to avoid seeming quiet. The goal isn't to eliminate spontaneity or humor, but to bridge the gap between impulse and expression. Epictetus advised, first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. That pause between meaning and speech is where your inner architect works, deciding whether to build connection or clutter. The irony, learning to speak less often makes your words carry more weight. Think of someone you admire for their wisdom. Chances are they don't dominate conversations. They listen, process, and contribute only when it matters. That's the Stoic ideal, not a vow of silence, but a mastery of resonance. Your voice is a tool, and like any tool, its value lies not in how often you use it, but in what you create with it. Cato the Younger, the Stoic statesman who defied Julius Caesar, would deliberately wear thin robes in winter and walk barefoot through Rome's icy streets. His contemporaries called it eccentric, he called it training, not for endurance but for sovereignty, the kind of inner command that turns discomfort from an enemy into an ally. This was voluntary hardship, a cornerstone of Stoic practice. The logic was simple. By routinely stepping into small, controlled struggles, you inoculate yourself against life's inevitable blows. Think of it like a mental vaccine, tiny exposures that build immunity to panic, entitlement, and fragility. Modern life has erased most natural discomforts. We control temperatures with thermostats, summon food with apps, and buffer ourselves from inconvenience at every turn. But the Stoics warned that comfort, unchecked, becomes a cage. When Musonius Rufus taught that hardship was a better trainer than luxury, He wasn't glorifying suffering, he was highlighting a paradox. The more we avoid discomfort, the more power it holds over us. Enter the cold shower. It's not about masochism or proving toughness. It's about reclaiming agency. That moment when icy water hits your skin and every instinct screams to retreat. That's the architect's chisel shaping your will. The key is intentionality. Cotto didn't shiver for show. He used cold exposure to practice indifference to externals. Similarly, fasting wasn't about weight loss for the Stoics. It was a masterclass in distinguishing need from want. When you skip a meal voluntarily, you expose the mental chatter, I'm starving, I can't focus, just one snack, as illusions. By the third hour, something shifts. The hunger doesn't disappear, but its tyranny does. You realize this sensation is unpleasant, but not unendurable. That revelation is the foundation of resilience. Try this today. Choose one comfort to relinquish for 24 hours. Maybe it's caffeine, your morning scroll, or the heater in your car. Notice the rationalizations that arise. I'll be less productive. It's just one day, what's the point? And recognize them as the mind's resistance to rewiring. The goal isn't austerity, it's flexibility. Like a tree that sways in storms because its roots have weathered droughts, your capacity to adapt grows strongest when tested in small, deliberate doses. Epictetus, who praised Cotto's practices, reminded his students, difficulty shows what men are. Voluntary discomfort strips away the illusion of control we mistake for strength. When you willingly stand in the cold or silence your phone for a day, you're not punishing yourself. You're rehearsing for life's unchosen trials. The next time traffic snarls or plans collapse, that practiced resilience becomes your default response. The discomfort you choose today is the composure you'll wield tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius had a habit of stepping outside himself, not just metaphorically, but almost cosmically. He'd imagine viewing his life from the stars, watching the tiny dramas of Rome unfold like scenes on a distant stage. He called this the view from above, and it wasn't escapism. It was a lens to clarify what truly mattered. Picture your most pressing stress right now, a work deadline, a family conflict, a financial worry. Now zoom out. Fast forward 10 years, how much of this will still weigh on you? That's the Stoic long view in action, not dismissing present struggles, but seeing them in proportion to the vast arc of a lifetime. History offers a striking example. In the year 79, Mount Vesuvius buried Pompeii in ash, freezing a city in its final moments. Centuries later, archaeologists found bread still in ovens, coins mid-exchange, lovers embracing. The ordinary worries of those people whether their bread would rise if they'd struck a good bargain mattered intensely until the very second they didn't. The Stoics would say, don't wait for a volcano to reveal what's trivial. Practice that perspective now. When you're stuck in traffic or agonizing over a critique, ask, if this were my last year, would it still command this much energy? Here's the paradox. Contemplating life's brevity doesn't diminish meaning, it concentrates it. Imagine holding an hourglass. The sand falls whether you watch it or not, but observing it changes how you use the time. Seneca wrote, it's not that we have too little time, but that we waste so much of it. He wasn't scolding, he was pointing to an opportunity. The long view isn't about nihilism. It's a tool to strip away pettiness, to stop mistaking urgency for importance. Try this exercise today. Pick one current anxiety. Maybe it's a project that feels make or break, or a social slight that stings. Now project yourself forward, not just 10 years, but 50, 100. Picture your great-grandchildren sorting through old photos, stumbling upon this moment. What would they see? The details, the missed promotion, the awkward party will blur. What remains is how you carried yourself, whether you were kind when stressed, gracious when slighted, steady when plans crumbled. That's the legacy the long view reveals. The Stoics weren't suggesting we float through life detached. They were architects, after all, builders who knew that great structures require both precision and perspective. When you design a cathedral, you don't fixate on a single brick. You step back, check the alignment, ensure each piece serves the whole. The view from above is that mental step back. It turns overwhelm into clarity, panic into purpose. The sand is still falling, yes, but now you're the one deciding where to place each grain. Seneca once observed that the mind, when constantly divided, becomes like water splashed across a table spread thin, impossible to gather back into a single purposeful stream. He wasn't just lamenting distraction, he was diagnosing a theft. Every time you switch tasks, scroll mindlessly, or half-listen while planning your reply, you're not just losing minutes, you're surrendering ownership of your most precious resource, attention. The ancient world had its own versions of this fragmentation. Romans would flock to gladiator games, not just for entertainment, but for the numbing rush of spectacle, a way to escape the weight of their own thoughts. Today, we don't need colosseums, we carry the distraction in our pockets. The average person checks their phone within 3 minutes of waking, as if outsourcing the first conscious thought of the day to a screen. But here's the Stoic countermove. Attention isn't something that happens to you, it's something you direct. Think of it like a flashlight in a dark room. You can let it flicker wildly, illuminating fragments of objects without fully seeing any of them, or you can steady the beam, choosing deliberately what deserves illumination. Seneca practiced this by writing letters in the middle of Rome's chaos, training his mind to focus as if building a cone of silence around himself. He wasn't ignoring the world, he was deciding which parts of it deserved entry. Try this experiment today. For 30 minutes, conduct an attention audit. Sit with a notebook and track where your mind goes. No judgment, just observation. You might notice patterns: how often you reach for your phone without reason, how quickly your thoughts dart to hypothetical worries, how rarely you stay with a single task uninterrupted. The goal isn't to eliminate distraction entirely, but to expose its mechanics. Like a Stoic scribe recording impressions, you're gathering data to reclaim sovereignty. Smartphones aren't the problem, it's the unchecked habit of handing them your focus at the first hint of boredom. The gladiator games thrived because they offered escape from self-reflection. Modern apps exploit the same vulnerability. But where the ancients had to physically attend the arena, we've built digital ones that follow us everywhere. The solution isn't rejection, but recalibration. Turn notifications from demands into requests. Designate spaces: a chair, a walk, a morning coffee, as screen-free zones where your mind learns to settle again. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness," he wasn't advocating relentless productivity. He was describing the art of presence, the radical act of fully inhabiting one thing at a time, a meal without multitasking, a conversation without mental rehearsals, a walk without headphones. These become rehearsals for larger moments when focus matters most, navigating conflict, creating work that resonates, or simply noticing life as it happens rather than through a filter of perpetual distraction. Attention, the Stoics knew, is the foundation of all other virtues. You can't be patient if your mind is racing toward the next thing, or courageous if you're too fragmented to face what's before you. The beam must steady before the path clears. The Stoics uncovered a paradox that still catches us off guard today. The more we try to control the world, the less control we actually have, while the more we focus on governing our own thoughts and actions, the more influence we seem to wield. Epictetus captured this with his archer analogy. A skilled archer can take aim, adjust their stance, and release the bowstring with perfect form. But once that arrow is in flight, it's at the mercy of wind, distance, and sheer chance. The archer's true mastery lies not in dictating where the arrow lands, but in perfecting everything leading up to the release. That's the essence of Stoic control, investing all your energy into the process while releasing your grip on outcomes. Now picture a job interview. You can rehearse answers, research the company, even choose an outfit that conveys confidence. But the moment you step out of that room, the decision is no longer yours to make. Obsessing over whether they'll call, dissecting every expression the interviewer made, or rewriting your responses in your head changes nothing. It's like the archer sprinting after the arrow, shouting directions as it flies. The irony, that mental churn doesn't just waste energy, it weakens your readiness for the next opportunity. The Stoic approach flips the script. Control what's yours: preparation, attitude, effort, and meet the result, whatever it is, with the same clarity you brought to the preparation. Here's the revealing question to ask when you feel anxiety creeping in. What outcome am I wrongly trying to guarantee? Maybe it's a first date where you've convinced yourself chemistry must lead to a relationship, or a creative project where you've equated effort with acclaim. These aren't just hopes, they're silent demands that the universe comply with your expectations. The Stoics would say this is where suffering takes root, not in wanting things to go well, but in insisting they must. Consider two entrepreneurs launching similar products. One fixates on metrics: daily sales, rival comparisons, the fear of obscurity. The other focuses on refining their craft, solving real problems, and connecting with their audience. The first is like an archer watching everyone else's targets. The second is adjusting their own aim. Over time, guess whose work resonates deeper? Control, in the Stoic sense, isn't about rigidity, it's about alignment. You don't get to decide if the world applauds, but you do get to choose whether your efforts are worthy of your own respect. Try this reframe today. Identify one area where you've been conflating preparation with prediction. Maybe it's a fitness goal where you've started measuring success by the scale rather than consistency, or a conversation where you rehearsed a script instead of truly listening. Then draw a literal or mental line between what's yours to shape your actions, your mindset, and what's not: others' reactions, external validation. The freedom lies not in lowering standards, but in redirecting your focus to the only arena where your efforts always matter, the inner game where you're both the archer and the target. Stillness in the Stoic sense isn't a lack of motion, it's motion refined, like a river that runs so deep its surface appears smooth. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." Be one. That imperative be isn't passive, it's persistent, decisive, alive with intention. Picture a surgeon in the operating room, hands steady not because they're unmoving, but because every movement is precise, purposeful. The chaos of a crisis swirls around them, yet their focus is unbroken. That's Stoic calm, not the absence of action, but action stripped of panic, distraction, and wasted energy. Passive resignation, on the other hand, is stillness without direction, a boat adrift mistaking surrender for peace. The Stoics rejected this utterly. When Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do," he wasn't advocating wishful thinking. He was demanding alignment between thought and deed. Consider a firefighter entering a burning building. Their training doesn't eliminate fear, it channels it into measured steps. The difference between courage and recklessness lies in that calibration, the ability to move with clarity amid chaos. So where do we mistake stillness for inaction? Often, it's in the spaces where discomfort lurks. We delay a difficult conversation, calling it patience. We avoid a career risk labeling it prudence, but Stoicism asks, is this truly wisdom or just resistance dressed in rationalization? The test is simple. Does your stillness serve a purpose or does it stall one? A tree's roots grow unseen, but they're pushing, reaching, anchoring silent labor that enables the visible rise of branches. Real Stoic quiet is like that, preparation disguised as pause. Take the example of Rosa Parks. Her refusal to give up her seat wasn't a sudden act, it was the culmination of years of quiet resolve. She later said, "I had been pushed as far as I could stand." That's the paradox of Stoic action. Sometimes the most powerful motion begins in the stillness of certainty. When you know your principles, you don't need to flail to prove them. You simply stand or step or speak with the steadiness of someone who's already done the inner work. Here's the challenge. Identify one area where you've conflated calm with avoidance. Maybe it's a project you've postponed under the guise of waiting for the right time, or a conflict you've sidestepped to keep the peace. Now ask, is this stillness strategic or just fear in disguise? The surgeon doesn't hesitate because the incision demands precision, not delay. Your life's most meaningful actions are no different. The Stoics didn't worship motion for its own sake. They revered motion that knew when to wait, and waiting that knew when to move. That's the rhythm of a mind built in silence, not frozen but poised. Seneca would often lie awake at night rehearsing catastrophe, not out of fear but strategy. He called it premeditatio malorum, the deliberate practice of visualizing adversity before it arrives. Picture him in his villa, mentally stripping away his wealth, status, even his freedom, asking himself, if I lost it all tomorrow, what would remain? This wasn't pessimism, it was emotional inoculation. By imagining exile, poverty, or betrayal in vivid detail, he wasn't inviting disaster, he was dismantling its power to shock him. The modern equivalent might be a fire drill. No one hopes for flames, but practicing escape routes ensures clarity when smoke appears. Take public speaking, a fear so common it outranks death in some surveys. Most people avoid thinking about their upcoming presentation until the moment they're clutching the podium, palms slick. The Stoic approach flips this. Long before stepping on stage, they'd mentally walk through every possible hiccup, the slide deck failing, the audience looking bored, their own voice shaking. They wouldn't just picture these scenarios, they'd rehearse their responses, taking a breath if technology falters, pausing to reconnect if attention wavers. Like a pilot running flight simulations, they knew familiarity with turbulence reduces its terror when it's real. This practice reveals a counterintuitive truth about anxiety. What we avoid visualizing gains monstrous power, while what we examine methodically shrinks to manageable size. A study on Olympic athletes found that those who visualized not just success but potential setbacks, a slipped grip on the parallel bars, a missed landing performed better under pressure. Their brains had already mapped the detours around failure. Here's how to apply this today. Pick one upcoming stressor, a difficult conversation with your boss, a medical test, a family gathering fraught with tension. Close your eyes and vividly imagine the worst-case scenario, not superficially but in granular detail. The tone of your boss's rejection, the ache in your chest hearing bad news, the awkward silence at dinner. Now picture yourself navigating it with steady breaths and measured responses. The goal isn't to manifest disaster, but to dissolve its novelty. When Seneca imagined poverty, he didn't just see himself hungry, he pictured himself enduring hunger with dignity. That's the alchemy of premeditatio malorum. It transforms what if from a taunt into a toolkit. The modern world obsesses over positive visualization dream boards, affirmation apps, manifesting ideal outcomes. The Stoics wouldn't dismiss these, but they'd add a crucial asterisk. Hope untempered by realism is a brittle shield. By preemptively walking through life's darker corridors, you're not inviting shadows, you're installing light so they won't blind you when encountered. As Seneca wrote to a friend, the person who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Your turn. What storm are you willing to rehearse? Epictetus described the mind as having a gatekeeper, one that doesn't control the thoughts that arrive, but decides which ones to let in. He called this power assent, the moment you mentally stamp approved or rejected on an impression. Here's the catch. Most of us treat every thought that knocks as an honored guest, rushing to entertain it without question. Imagine scrolling through social media and stumbling on a post that triggers instant irritation, maybe a political jab or a tone-deaf humblebrag. Your first thought might be, "That's ridiculous," or even, "How could anyone think that?" The Stoic move isn't to deny that reaction. It's to pause and ask, does this impression deserve my endorsement? Social media outrage offers the perfect training ground for this discipline. A celebrity says something controversial, and within minutes, your feed floods with hot takes. The natural response is to pick a side, to let the emotional wave carry you toward anger or defensiveness. But Epictetus would intervene. You're not disturbed by the post itself, but by your judgment about it. That judgment is where the power lies. Between the stimulus, the words on the screen, and your reaction, there's a space. And in that space, you choose whether to give the impression weight or let it pass like background noise. Consider a real-world example. A coworker sends an email that feels dismissive. The first impression might scream, "They're undermining me." But before forwarding it to a sympathetic colleague or drafting a defensive reply, the Stoic pauses. They examine the impression. Is there another explanation? Could the tone be a result of haste, not malice? This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about refusing to let an unexamined thought dictate your behavior. The email hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. Here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, notice one automatic judgment you'd normally accept without question. Maybe it's assuming the driver who cut you off is reckless, or interpreting a friend's delayed reply as indifference. When the impression arises, mentally label it. This is a first draft, not the final verdict. The goal isn't to eliminate judgments, but to expose their optional nature. Like an editor reviewing a manuscript, you're not deleting every critical note, you're just refusing to publish the raw draft. Epictetus trained his students to treat impressions like suspicious salesmen at the door. Don't let them in until you've checked their credentials. Modern life, with its endless stream of notifications and hot takes, makes this skill more vital than ever. Every unexamined impression you approve becomes a brick in the walls of your mind, some sturdy, others brittle. The weight of assent isn't about thinking less, it's about thinking deliberately. And in that deliberation, you reclaim the one thing no algorithm can touch, your inner sovereignty. Seneca once wrote, "We are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting time." His words cut to the heart of a modern illusion that we're stretching our days by juggling tasks when in truth, we're dissolving them. The Stoics saw time not as a river to be chased, but as a single point, the present moment, the only place where life actually unfolds. Picture a musician lost in the flow of a performance, fingers moving without conscious thought, the music pouring through them rather than from them. That's the silent mastery of presence, not passive absorption, but total engagement with what's before you. Now contrast that with how most of us eat lunch, scrolling through emails, half watching a video, barely tasting the food while our minds ricochet between past regrets and future deadlines. The Stoics would call this a kind of self-betrayal. When Seneca warned, We lose the past and the future because neither exists. He wasn't dismissing planning or reflection. He was exposing the cost of mistaking mental clutter for productivity. Every distraction is a tiny abandonment of the only moment you ever truly possess, this one. Here's the experiment. Try a meal today where eating is the sole task. Not a meditation exercise, not a performance, just a sandwich and your full attention. Notice the crunch of bread, the sharpness of mustard, the way flavors shift as you chew. When your mind wanders to an unpaid bill or a looming meeting, gently guide it back, not with frustration, but the way you'd redirect a child absorbed in a game. No judgment, no pressure, just returning. You might discover something startling. A 10-minute meal where you're fully present feels longer and richer than an hour of fractured attention. The same applies to walking. Most of us treat it as transit time, a gap to fill with podcasts or phone calls. But the Stoics saw movement as a chance to practice presence. Thoreau, though not a Stoic, captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Methinks that the moment my legs begin to move, my thoughts begin to flow. There's a rhythm to walking that untangles thoughts, a silent dialogue between body and surroundings that gets drowned out by earbuds." Try it. Walk without destination or distraction. Just the sensation of weight shifting from heel to toe, the play of light through leaves, the cadence of breath. When was the last time you fully inhabited an ordinary moment? Not a vacation sunset or a milestone celebration, but the unremarkable in between folding laundry, stirring coffee, waiting for a train. These are the hidden chambers where Stoic presence is built. The past is archived, the future imagined, but the present, that's the workshop. Every time you anchor yourself there, even for 5 conscious breaths, you're not just passing time. You're reclaiming it. Marcus Aurelius often pictured himself as a single thread woven into the vast tapestry of the universe, a perspective the Stoics called sympatheia, the silent understanding that everything is interconnected. He wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was a radical lens for living. Imagine standing on a mountaintop at dawn, watching the first light touch valleys, rivers, distant towns, each part distinct yet undeniably linked. That's sympatheia, the recognition that your choices ripple outward and the world's rhythms flow inward, shaping you in ways both seen and unseen. Take teamwork as a microcosm of this idea. A soccer team isn't just 11 individuals chasing a ball. It's a living system where every pass, every sprint, even every hesitation alters the whole. The striker who fails to track back defensively might not see the chain reaction, the overloaded midfielder, the exhausted defender, the conceded goal. But the Stoic would. They'd sense their thread tugging others for better or worse. Zoom out further, and the same principle applies to environmental stewardship. That plastic bottle tossed aside doesn't vanish. It becomes part of a gyre in the Pacific, a toxin in a fish, a chemical in someone's bloodstream halfway across the globe. The ancients didn't have climate science, but they grasped the truth beneath it. Harm to one strand is harm to the web. Here's the pivot. How does this cosmic perspective shift your current worry? That argument with your partner, the project deadline, the insecurity gnawing at you, what happens when you frame it within the universe's grand weave? Suddenly, the urgency softens, the ego's chatter, "This is everything," meets the quiet counterpoint of sympatheia. This too is part of something larger. That's not dismissiveness, it's clarity. Like an astronomer peering through a telescope, you're not denying the importance of Earth's dramas, you're seeing them in their true proportion against the stars. Consider the Japanese practice of forest bathing, immersing oneself in woods not just for air but for the unseen exchange. trees communicate through fungal networks, warning neighbors of pests, sharing nutrients. Your breath mingles with their exhalations, their stillness calibrates your pulse. The Stoics would not. This is sympatheia in action, the silent dialogue between human and ecosystem. You don't need to believe in cosmic fate to feel it. Just walk through an old-growth forest and sense the truth in your bones. Now bring it down to the mundane. Stuck in traffic, instead of simmering, notice how your frustration radiates, tightening your grip on the wheel, shortening your tone with a passenger, carrying tension into the next interaction. Or choose the alternative. Let the delay be a thread in the day's tapestry. The cars around you aren't obstacles, they're fellow threads, each with their own frayed edges and hidden patterns. Sympatheia doesn't demand saintly patience, just the recognition that even irritation is a stitch in the fabric, and you get to decide whether it knots or flows. The next time a problem feels all-consuming, try this. Sketch 2 circles on paper. Label the inner one, my control, the outer one, the universe's story. Place your concern where it belongs. That work conflict, it matters, but it's not the whole loom, the anxiety about tomorrow, a single thread among billions. This perspective doesn't diminish your struggles, it embeds them in meaning. Marcus didn't stop ruling Rome because he contemplated the cosmos. He ruled better, knowing his thread was part of a design grander than any one emperor. Your life, however quiet, is no different. The tapestry grows with every choice, every breath, every moment you remember. You're not just in the universe, you're of it. Epictetus drew a line in the sand of human desire with one radical question: is this within my power or not? He wasn't asking us to abandon wanting, he was challenging us to audit what we chase. The discipline of desire isn't about extinguishing longing, it's about aligning it with what's truly yours to govern. Picture a child in a toy store, face pressed against the glass, convinced happiness lives inside that shiny box. Adults aren't so different, we just replace toys with promotions, likes, or the perfect home. The Stoic twist: that glass isn't a barrier, it's a mirror. The wanting itself is the trap, not the object. Modern consumerism runs on manufactured discontent, the subtle lie that you'll finally be enough once you acquire X. But the Stoics spotted this hustle 2,000 years ago. Seneca mocked Rome's elite who upgraded their marble floors annually, not because the old ones wore out, but because new patterns became fashionable. His critique wasn't about wealth, it was about the poverty of always needing more. Contentment, in contrast, isn't settling. It's the realization that you already own the only currency that matters, your choice to find sufficiency in this moment. Take smartphones. The average user unlocks theirs 150 times a day, not because they need to, but because they've been conditioned to fear missing out. Epictetus would call this misaligned aversion, the dread of boredom or irrelevance driving compulsive checks. The harm isn't in the device, it's in the uncontrolled urge to reach for it. Contrast this with the artist who leaves their phone in another room for hours, not as punishment, but to preserve the sanctity of their craft. Both have the same tool, only one has mastered the discipline of desire around it. Here's the litmus test. Next time you feel that tug towards something, a purchase, a refresh of your inbox, pause and ask Epictetus' question: is this truly within my control? The latest gadget might be, but the status you hope it brings isn't. The effort to prepare for a presentation is, but the audience's reaction isn't. Realigning desire isn't deprivation. It's liberation from puppet strings you didn't realize were tied to your limbs. Consider the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection, richness in simplicity. A cracked teacup repaired with gold isn't discarded. Its flaw becomes part of its story. That's Stoic desire in practice, wanting what you have instead of having what you want. The crack isn't the problem, the obsession with pristine china is. So here's the challenge. Identify one harmless desire you can release today. Maybe it's the itch to check metrics on a recent post or the craving for praise after a kindness. Not because these are bad, but because their hold on you is optional. When you untether happiness from external validation, you're not losing anything. You're reclaiming the only approval that ever truly mattered, your own. The Stoics didn't teach indifference, they taught discernment. The world will keep selling you desires, but the silent discipline of wanting wisely, that's where true wealth begins. Amor fati, the love of fate, isn't about passive resignation to life's twists and turns. It's about embracing them with the quiet intensity of a blacksmith shaping red-hot iron, knowing the fire itself is part of the transformation. Nietzsche, though not a Stoic, captured this perfectly with his phrase amor fati. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. The Stoics would have added, to love it silently, without fanfare or complaint, as if every setback were a hidden collaborator in your growth. Consider the story of a musician who lost the use of their dominant hand in an accident. At first, the injury felt like a death sentence until they discovered their non-dominant hand had untapped creativity, producing melodies their trained hand had never conceived. The accident didn't change their destiny. It revealed a path they'd never have chosen voluntarily. That's amor fati in action, not pretending the loss didn't hurt, but recognizing how the wound became a doorway. The Stoics called this the art of acquiescence, the willingness to accept what life hands you while retaining the power to choose what you make of it. History brims with these unexpected alchemies. When the Great Fire of London destroyed 2/3 of the city in 1666, architect Christopher Wren didn't lament the ashes. He saw the chance to rebuild a metropolis with wider streets, brick buildings, and modern sanitation. The disaster became the blueprint for a healthier, more resilient city. The Stoics would argue that every personal catastrophe holds the same potential, not because suffering is noble, but because reinvention often requires a blank canvas. Here's the probing question. What event are you still resisting that might contain a gift in disguise? Maybe it's a job rejection that freed you to explore a passion project, or a breakup that taught you how to be alone without being lonely. Amor fati doesn't demand you celebrate the pain, only that you stop fighting the lessons it carries. Like a tree bending in a storm, the flexibility to accept what you cannot change isn't weakness. It's the secret to unbreakable resilience. Think of a river blocked by a fallen tree. It doesn't waste energy raging against the obstacle. It finds new channels, nourishing unexpected patches of land along the way. Your life's interruptions, the missed flights, the failed ventures, the plans that crumbled aren't roadblocks. They're detours to places your original map never included. The practice is simple but profound. Each morning, whisper to yourself, this day, whatever it brings, is mine to meet with curiosity, not resistance. Over time, that whisper becomes the silent foundation of a mind that doesn't just endure fate but dances with it. Seneca once wrote that difficulty is the fire that forges strength, not because suffering itself is noble, but because it strips away illusions, revealing the unvarnished truth of who we are. He wasn't romanticizing hardship, he was exposing its hidden curriculum. Think of a sapling growing on a windswept cliff. Every gust that bends its branches also stimulates its roots to dig deeper, its fibers to grow tougher. The storm doesn't threaten its survival, it engineers it. That's the paradox of life's trials. What feels like resistance is often the very force shaping resilience. Now apply this to a moment you've labeled as purely painful. Maybe it was a rejection letter that arrived the same week your car broke down, or a friendship that fractured when you needed support most. The instinct is to see these as pure losses, but the Stoic lens asks, what if they're also assignments, silent lessons in detachment, priorities, or the art of starting over? Consider the story of James Dyson, the inventor who built 5,000 failed prototypes before perfecting his vacuum cleaner. Each failure wasn't a dead end, it was a tutor, revealing what the blueprint couldn't. Here's the shift: the unseen curriculum doesn't require you to enjoy the lesson. It simply invites you to stop resisting the classroom. When a musician practices scales for hours, their fingers ache, but the discomfort isn't the enemy, it's the mechanism of mastery. Your current struggle might be teaching you patience or boundaries, or how to distinguish between what you want and what you truly need. The key is to stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this revealing in me?" Try this today. Pick one recent setback, a missed opportunity, a conflict, even a minor inconvenience like a cancelled flight. Instead of cataloging its frustrations, interrogate it like a Stoic scholar. What might it be teaching you about adaptability, about your own triggers or assumptions? About the difference between control and surrender, write down 3 insights, no matter how small. The goal isn't to dismiss the pain, but to decode its purpose. History's most enduring figures, from Nelson Mandela to Marie Curie, didn't transcend hardship because they avoided it. They transformed it into fuel by asking the questions most of us avoid. The wind doesn't stop for the sapling, but over time, the sapling learns to draw strength from the very force that once seemed bent on breaking it. Your trials are no different. They're not interruptions to your story, they're the text itself. And the more you listen to their quiet instruction, the more fluent you become in the language of resilience. Marcus Aurelius would often remind himself that even the most celebrated names would one day be forgotten, swept away by what he called the river of time. He wrote these words not as a cynic but as an emperor, a man who could have easily spent his days chasing glory, yet chose instead to focus on the quiet work of integrity. His journal entries reveal a startling truth. The same river that carries away reputations also washes clean the slate of our anxieties about how we're perceived. There's a silent strength in recognizing that the applause you crave today will be replaced by new voices tomorrow, that the slights you obsess over will dissolve into irrelevance. This isn't nihilism, it's liberation. Consider the ancient Roman triumph, a lavish parade where victorious generals rode through the streets to roaring crowds, a slave whispering in their ear, "Remember, you are mortal." It was theater, but Stoic theater, designed to puncture the illusion of permanence. Fast forward to today, and the stage has changed, but the script hasn't. Social media metrics are our modern triumphs: likes and followers, the fleeting applause we secretly fear living without. The ego's hunger for validation hasn't evolved, it's just found new currencies to crave. The Stoic antidote: to ask, as Marcus did, what does this momentary attention truly weigh against the vastness of time? Here's the irony: the less you cling to your own importance, the more room you create for real impact. Think of a tree. Its roots don't shout about their depth. They simply hold firm, allowing the branches to grow without toppling. Humility works the same way. When scientist Rosalind Franklin's X-ray images revealed the structure of DNA, her male colleagues took credit, winning Nobel Prizes while her contribution was sidelined. Yet those who study her notebooks see no bitterness, just meticulous work, driven by curiosity rather than acclaim. Her legacy isn't in the prizes she didn't receive, but in the truth she helped uncover. The Stoics would call this the paradox of ego demolition. The less you insist on being seen, the more clearly your work speaks. So here's the challenge: identify one ego-driven worry you've been carrying like a weight. Maybe it's the frustration that a colleague got praised for an idea you sparked, or the itch to correct someone's misconception about you online. Now, imagine holding that concern up to Marcus' river of time. Picture it floating away, joining the countless other trivialities that once felt urgent. What remains? Only what you built when no one was watching: the quiet acts of kindness, the private discipline, the moments you chose integrity over recognition. That's the hidden architecture of humility, not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And in that space, you'll find a strength no algorithm can measure. Seneca once wrote that death isn't something that happens at the end of life. It's happening now with every passing breath. He called this realization Memento Mori, the practice of remembering mortality not as a morbid fixation, but as a silent clarifier. Picture a candle burning at both ends. The flame isn't just a countdown, it's a spotlight on what truly deserves your attention. The Stoics didn't dwell on death to paralyze themselves. They used it to strip away illusions, revealing the uncluttered core of what mattered. Think of it like walking through a dense forest with a machete. Every swing clears away the underbrush of trivial worries. What so thought of your presentation, whether you should upgrade your phone until only the towering trees remain. Love, purpose, the moments that hum with aliveness. Consider how differently we approach time when faced with its limits. A terminal diagnosis often triggers what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, a sudden clarity where old grudges dissolve, and quiet afternoons with family feel like treasures. The irony: you don't need a diagnosis to access that perspective. The Stoics practiced Memento Mori precisely to avoid waiting for crisis to force their awakening. When Seneca warned, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire," he was exposing the paradox of modern life. We sweat the small stuff while postponing what truly nourishes us, as if we'll always get to it later. History offers a striking contrast. In ancient Rome, generals celebrating military triumphs were followed by a slave whose sole job was to whisper, "Look behind you. Remember, you are mortal." Meanwhile, today's culture bombards us with the opposite message: you're limitless, buy more, achieve more, outrun time itself. The Stoics would call this collective delusion. Mortality isn't a buzzkill, it's the ultimate editor. When you write knowing the page will soon run out, you choose words with care. The same applies to life, so here's the question to carry with you. If this year were your last, what would you stop tolerating? Maybe it's the soul-draining job you've been clinging to for security, or the half-hearted relationships you've been too polite to either mend or release. And more vitally, what would you start honoring? Perhaps it's the book idea you've been saving for retirement, or the quiet mornings with coffee and birdsong that you've been rushing through to get to emails. Legacy isn't about statues or Wikipedia pages. It's about the imprint of your presence on the people and pursuits that resonate with your deepest values. The modern world screams for your attention, but mortality whispers the truth. You've already been given everything you need to begin. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect now. The candle burns, the forest waits, and the choice is always yours, to hack through the underbrush or stay lost in the thicket. The silence of Memento Mori doesn't frighten the Stoic mind, it focuses it. After all, what could be more urgent than a life fully lived? The most formidable structures aren't built in a single dramatic effort, they're assembled brick by brick, in silence, day after day. The Stoics understood this intimately. Their philosophy wasn't about grand gestures or overnight transformations. It was about the quiet, cumulative power of microhabits, small, deliberate practices that compound over time into unshakable inner control. Think of your mind as a cathedral under construction. The morning intention you set isn't just a thought, it's the first stone laid for the day. The pause you take before reacting isn't just a breath, it's the mortar binding your emotional walls. And the evening review, that's the architect stepping back to assess the day's progress, adjusting the blueprint for tomorrow. Start with morning intention, not a to-do list, but a to-be list. Marcus Aurelius began his days by asking, "What qualities will I cultivate today?" Patience, courage, curiosity. He didn't wait for circumstances to demand these traits. He preloaded them into his mindset like software updates. Try this before checking your phone or diving into tasks. Spend 30 seconds naming one virtue you'll embody. It could be as simple as, "Today, I'll listen more than I speak," or "I'll meet interruptions with grace." The key isn't the scale of the intention, but the consistency of the practice. A single sentence repeated daily becomes the subconscious script running beneath life's chaos. Then there's the pause before speaking, a habit Musonius Rufus called the gatekeeper of the soul. In a world that rewards quick takes and rapid-fire opinions, this tiny silence is revolutionary. Picture a courtroom stenographer typing every word you utter. Would your speech change if you knew it was being recorded? The Stoics lived this way, treating each word as a deliberate choice rather than a reflex. Practice it today. In one conversation, let your natural response rise, then hold it for 2 seconds. Notice the urge to fill the silence, the fear of seeming slow. Then speak. That gap is where your inner architect works, deciding whether your words will build bridges or rubble. End with the evening review, Seneca's favorite tool. Not a guilt-fueled inventory of failures, but a neutral audit. Ask 2 questions. Where did I align with my intentions today? And where did externals hijack my focus? No judgment, just observation, like a scientist noting data. Maybe you caught yourself before snapping at a colleague, a win. Or maybe you mindlessly refreshed your inbox 10 times, a clue. The goal isn't perfection, it's pattern recognition. Over time, these quiet minutes reveal the fractures in your mental architecture, the weak joints where a little more reinforcement could turn reactivity into resilience. The magic lies in the mundane. A sculptor doesn't strike the marble once and expect a masterpiece. They chip away day after day, trusting the process. Your habits are the chisel. The challenge: pick one, just one, of these micro practices for 30 days, not as a test of willpower, but as an experiment in compounding. Set a daily reminder if you must, but don't mistake simplicity for insignificance. The grandest cathedrals were built by hands that showed up consistently, not dramatically. Your mind is no different. The bricks are small, the blueprint is clear. All that's left is to lay the first one. The strongest trees don't announce their growth, they simply stand, roots deepening in silence, branches reaching without fanfare. Marcus Aurelius knew this when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That realization isn't a thunderclap. It's the quiet accumulation of mornings spent choosing intention over impulse, evenings spent reflecting instead of ruminating, and countless moments in between where you paused before reacting. Inner control isn't seized in dramatic declarations. It's built like an underground river, carving its path one drop at a time. Consider the way we admire ancient cathedrals. Their soaring arches, their stained glass that transforms sunlight into stories. But what truly holds them up? The unseen buttresses, the foundations laid stone by stone, the careful calculations made by architects who knew their work would outlast them. Your mind is no different. The moments no one witnesses, the deep breath before answering a provocation, the decision to walk away from gossip, the silent commitment to start again after a setback. These are the hidden buttresses of your character. They don't make headlines, but they shape the architecture of your life. Here's the twist: mastery doesn't roar, it whispers. The loudest voices in the room are often the least secure, while true strength hums beneath the surface. Think of a concert pianist. The magic isn't in the pounding of keys, but in the spaces between notes, the restraint that makes each chord resonate. Or a martial artist who wins not by flailing hardest, but by redirecting energy with precision. The Stoics called this hegemonikon the governing principle of the soul. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about channeling it with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their power doesn't need proving. So where do you begin? Not with grand resolutions, but with micro shifts. The next time frustration rises, try this. Instead of reacting, step back mentally and ask, what would my strongest self do here? Not the version of you that seeks validation or wins arguments, but the one that operates from unshakable inner ground. That tiny pause is where the roots grow. As Marcus reminded himself, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What hue will yours take? The vibrant clarity of intentional action, or the murk of unchecked reaction? The choice is yours, and the practice is silent. Hit subscribe if you're ready to explore more of this quiet strength, and in the comments tell us which Stoic practice from today's video resonated with you. Was it the view from above, the discipline of ascent, or something else? Your insight might be the nudge someone else needs to start building their own inner citadel. Remember, the loudest mastery whispers, the rest is just noise.